It's a bit hard to preach after we've just sung the Londonderry Air. I get a bit choked up. Thanks for planning that, Maria. Not quite fair. All right. Thank you. The Weaker Brother. That's the sermon title today, The Weaker Brother. You know, the longer I walk with Jesus, I'm sure it's the same for you, the more I realize there are many things I become less certain about, and a smaller number of things become non-negotiable. I wonder if you've experienced that tenderness between certainty and uncertainty. And all of that has reminded me recently of that Romans 14 passage, the weaker brother. You remember that discussion. This weaker brother was defined as someone who knows about the freedom Jesus offers, but there's that fear, maybe of failure, fear of falling from grace, so they live a really limited life. They stick to their old routines and rituals. And I know this is me. I'm the one who eats vegetables. I like it. And yet we've just been singing about Job 38. Where were you when you laid the earth's foundations, when heavens shouted for joy, the sea and its limits, and the water split in two, the morning dew, and all the horizons, and just this vast, beautiful creation, and yet we live our life so small as the weaker brother. There was a phrase someone was telling me that came up during Synod. One of the delegates got up to speak against the HSR debate, and he introduced his speech with, "I may be the weaker brother here." And then he went on to describe his position. Often we see someone as a weaker brother when they're more easily swayed by certain teachings. But I wonder, for me, am I the weaker person simply by being someone who gets so fixated on little things, little issues, and big issues too, but you get so fixated on positions that it gets in the way of appreciating abundance and appreciating freedom and the glory of the vastness of creation? Peter, I think, was a weaker brother. Peter was someone who was fixated on his own competence as a fisherman. He was standing in that pivotal moment between certainty and uncertainty, that place we all come to worship in. Certainty, uncertainty. Is this really true? The words that we hear on a Sunday morning, is it really true? Is it worth staking all of our lives on? And then the uncertainty, but how is my life going to play out this year? How is my job really going? All the family tensions that are tenuous, all the stresses there. My job performance, my academic performance, all the uncertainties. And in all these anxieties, there's the question, are you going to hold on to your own way of life, or can you give it up and say, the abundance Jesus offers is more? So I want you to imagine, how does this story of fishing resonate with you? How might this story be an invitation to you to hand over all the things you get fixated on and say yes to the abundance Jesus offers? So on this Creation Sunday, come with me to the wide open space of the lake where Jesus is preaching out in the boat. And there's this absurd command Jesus gives to the fishermen. Remember, Jesus is not a fisherman, he's a carpenter. But he tells these fishermen, these men who probably from the youngest of ages have been out with their fathers in the boats, fathers like Zebedee being trained up for their vocation, their family business, and then Jesus comes along and says, can you do it differently? Put down your nets and launch out into the deep. Now, there's just so much to be insulted by. Jesus, this isn't the way we fish. We go out at night. There they were washing their nets. They'd worked the night shift. This was their moment to rest. And Jesus came and he disrupted their rhythm of how they were at work. Jesus, what do you think we've just been doing all night? We've been laboring and we've caught nothing. I wonder if that describes you, laboring and yet fruitless. Laboring during the pandemic, problem solving, endlessly laboring to problem solve, to come up with more and more solutions, and you come out empty. And also, it's daytime. This is not when fishermen fish. Scholars suggest the type of net they were using was this type of linen. So if this linen went into the water during the day, the fish would see it. They are not going to go into the net. So why take orders from this carpenter who seems to know nothing about fishing? Peter was locked into a system of fishing that he thought he was right. But he was about to become disoriented by grace, by a bigger picture. Grace had come knocking at his door. Maybe, just maybe, Peter had been watching Jesus, watching the demons that Jesus had cast out, watching how Jesus took his own mother-in-law, Peter's mother-in-law, and made her better. And maybe he realizes, even though this person is a carpenter, there's something about Jesus' words that make transformation happen. And so when Jesus comes to Peter and says, launch out into the deep and let down your nets, even though Peter's protesting, he says, Master, which tells us something about what's going on. Master means you're the one who has authority. You're the master. You're the master of fishermen. In other words, Jesus, I'm going to hand over my authority to you. Simply let you be in control of my boat. You're not going to be a passenger in my boat. You're not going to be the sideline commentator, but you're going to be the master. And you see, what's going on here is Peter is working out this space where it's okay to figure out disagreements together. And that's a hard place to be in, isn't it? For all our religious freedom and tolerance in this country, it's hard to find that safe space where people have honest differences, where honest Christians can have disagreements. And I find it so compelling to see Peter be able to stand up before Jesus and say, well, this is not how we do things around here, but I might be wrong. And I want this place to be a place of worship where we can do that with each other, to show up before God and say, well, I might be the one who's wrong here. So let's work it out together. Let's work out this way of following Jesus together. Peter allowed Jesus to disrupt his rhythms of working, to disrupt the way in which he worked, and allowed Jesus to be the master. And then almost immediately we're thrown into this miracle. We get into hyperbole language. The catch is so large that one boat's not going to manage this haul of fish. They need two boats. And the nets get so bulging that they're about to break. And then the boats get so full that they're about to sink. This is not a story of where Jesus enters the scene and all ends well. This is chaos. This is a picture of bulging chaos where Jesus does something in Peter's life that is overwhelming. The boat is sinking. The most treasured part of their property is going down. Their lives are in danger. And what's interesting to me is this is the moment where the story pivots. Peter doesn't use this miracle as an illustration of how he's going to be a better fisherman. Imagine if you were in this story and Jesus had come telling you to fish a different way. And you get this wealth of fish. I know if it had been me, I'd be thinking, well, maybe this is an opportunity to improve my fishing skills. I'd be thinking about how I would adapt this strategy into my vocation. But that doesn't happen. The story shifts very suddenly because Peter is no longer viewing through the lens of being a fisherman, but instead his gaze begins to turn to the presence of God. Peter realizes God is here. God is present. That's what's important. God seems to be in Jesus. How is that possible? This carpenter and God is here. And you begin to see that there's this change, this transformation happening between the connection being made between Peter and Jesus. They change how they call each other. Did you notice that? After the haul of fish, Jesus called Simon, Simon Peter. And Simon calls Jesus not master, but Lord. It's as if a connection is being made, a fishing line connection between Simon Peter and Jesus as Lord. Their truest identities are being disclosed to each other. Jesus is not just a master in a boat, but the Lord of the universe dwells in Jesus, the one who says in Job 38, I walk along the recesses of the depth of the ocean. And Simon Peter is the name Jesus begins to use for this one who is going to be the rock of the church. You see, this divine gaze, this fishing line connection begins to call out the true identity of each other. And that's enough to unravel Peter. That's enough to make him realize his true identity, but also his truest nature. I am sinful. I am a weaker brother. All this time I thought I was doing a good job as a fisherman, holding up my own competence. And now I realize I'm not worthy to be in the presence of God. And what does Jesus do? Well, he doesn't say, yes, you're a sinner, away you go. Work harder, do some penance. Jesus doesn't separate himself out from this sinner, but instead Jesus says, welcome. Welcome home, Peter. Join with me in this family. Allow yourself to be caught up in witnessing to what I can do in this world. Welcome to the world of sinners. Peter had been caught. And now that Peter had been caught, his job was to catch others. Jesus says to Peter, don't be afraid, for from now on you'll be catching people. From now on, something definitive has happened. From now on, leave the past behind you and start looking ahead. From now on, follow me. You're going to catch people. You're going to be fishers of men. Now, when you hear that phrase, fishers of men, I know it jars with me. I don't know how it lands with you, but it always felt a little odd. Fishers of men. Because I associate fish with catching a fish. The fish is dead, the fish is sold, you eat the fish. It's an exertion of dominance on a fish that's helpless. There's a bit of violence in there, wouldn't you say? It's not hardly the metaphor I would want to be a part of. But what I think is happening here is really clever because the metaphor too is being transformed. Something that was associated with violence and domination becomes this place of rescue. The Greek word for catching or fishing is the verb that talks about this war conflict situation, and you're catching prisoners with the hope that they will eventually be set free. They're not going to be killed, but you're hopefully setting them into a place of liberation. And also it's catching people. It's not catching dead fish, but it's catching people and giving them their lives back. Rescue, liberation. The metaphor is being turned on its head. And so we're being invited into this catching too, into this fishing line connection between the divine and the human. I like Brian McLaren's musings on fly fishing. It helps me understand what's going on. He says there's something about capturing a fish that feels both primal and holy, especially when I'm not fishing to get dinner, but for sport or for catch and release, as it's called. When a fish takes my artificial fly, whether it's a trout or a tarpon in the Everglades, I feel that the line could be this electric cord transferring the animal's aliveness, its vital energy, like a current through my arm to the body and my soul. The truth is, I don't actually fish just for sport, as if fishing were a competition that involved me winning over the fish. Nor do I simply fish to catch and release. No, I fish for the sense of connection, for the sense of aliveness, of feeling the strength. That's what Peter had been caught into by this fishing line, pulled out of a legalistic, routine way of living and brought into the kingdom of abundance and aliveness. Now you would think after catching this big haul of fish, these fishermen would have been running straight to the marketplace. They'd won the lottery and they would be selling it off. But the astounding outcome of this gaze of Christ's loving presence had so affected Peter that he's able to leave it all behind. He's able to let go of this large haul of fish. And he humbles himself, falls down on his knees, and he recognizes Jesus as Lord. He's able to walk away from the family business, walk away from contributing to the embedded economy of Galilee. Just walk away into the unknown, into places that he couldn't even dare dream about, but he was with Jesus. Simon Peter, the weaker brother, the sinner, had found this release to walk with Jesus as his friend. Because Jesus was not afraid to cross the boundary, to step right into that daily activity of what Simon Peter was doing, to speak the language of fishing, and to call him out of his own world into Christ's kingdom world. And at the height of Peter's greatest success as a fisherman, he's able to let it all go and walk away. Because Jesus was the new center of his life. So my question to you today is, where do you find yourself in this story? Here's 3 possible places. Maybe you're at that place with Jesus and you're working it out. There's a bit of disagreement. You feel angry with God, angry about disruption. My life was okay, God, until you stepped in. But use that as a safe place to come to Jesus and ask for that first clarity, and then that second clarity, and then that greater clarity of what's going on. And use this congregation as the safe place to work it out amongst people who love you and care for you. Maybe you're the weaker brother, because in order to try and cover up your sense of inadequacies, you're working so hard, you're killing yourself. Self-imposed demands. Maybe there's an invitation to lay down this legalistic way of living and see abundance and freedom that's in front of you. Maybe you simply need the encouragement to know that we're all Peters. There's times we call Jesus Master. There's times we call him Lord. There's times we're not really sure we're on the right path. Peter, I think, was half-hearted in his response. Master, this is not how we do things, but at your word I'll do it. You're calling me to do this, and I'm not sure about it, but I'll do it anyway. Maybe that for you is an encouragement to keep following Jesus. You don't need to have it all figured out, but you simply look for where Jesus is and you keep going. So, regardless of where this place lands with you, I want you to bring it to Jesus in a moment. I'm going to do something with this bell, but I want to explain why I'm doing it, because when I first became a solo pastor, I was stationed in a place called Island Magee, which was a little peninsula off the coast of Ireland. It was 1 mile wide and 7 miles long. It wasn't an island, very Irish thing to do, to call something Island Magee. But there was a causeway that you got onto the island that we called it. And for years, the industry was fishing. There were sailors, there were sea captains, there were fishermen. And so part of our liturgical cycle every year was to hold a sailor service in January, because that was the time that the seas were at their choppiest and many would get lost at sea. And so it was a time to remember, a time to pray for sailors, a time to recognize that God is big and that the sea is big, but God is bigger. And the purpose was to pray that God would hold us in the midst of all the disruptions, and the church would be decked out with boats and flags and compasses and the ship's bell. And at the end of the service, after the benediction, we practiced the liturgy that would happen out on the sea. There were a couple of sea captains who'd retired, and they passed on the tradition to us. They rang the bell. And at the end of the day, this is what they said was important about ringing the bell. They said, no man has ever served at sea without knowing that each day could be his last. No one would even know where at sea he might lay. No man served a day at sea without the knowledge that the ship he sailed might not survive till the next day. But no man at sea lets those fears overcome him. And so at the end of each day, men at sea counted their blessings of a day well done. And to mark the end of their watch and the end of the day, they would toll the bell, the eternal mark of the passing of time at sea. So I'm going to toll the bell and use that as an opportunity for you to hand over all the uncertainties of your life and say, God, you're big, you can hold these things. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.